There's a claim about the Atlantic slave trade you've probably seen online. It goes something like this.
Europeans and Americans didn't go over to Africa with a lasso and start wrangling up random black people. We didn't do that. We went over there and other black people sold them to us. They were already slaves to begin with. They were slaves before they even made it to America.
On the surface, this sounds like an even-handed correction of the historical record. The problem is, we have the historical record, and it was written by the man running the operation. August 8, 1444, Prince Henry the Navigator sits on horseback in Lagos, Portugal, watching 235 captured Africans being divided into lots, while captives cling to each other so close they can hardly be separated. This wasn't a market the Portuguese walked into, they built it. Europeans initially did organize slave raids, and when those raids couldn't keep up with demand, they built a system to do it at scale. What I want to do in this video is go through some primary sources to clear up this misconception. But before we do that, let me make something very clear. Slavery did exist in Africa before Europeans arrived. That is true, but it came in two specific forms, and neither was the system Europeans stepped into. The first was the trans-Saharan trade, Muslim merchants moving captives across the desert. In 1614, the Timbuktu scholar Ahmed Baba ruled on which captives could legally be held. Non-belief is that which makes enslavement permissible, whether the enslaved were black or white. Enslavement was bound to religion, not race. The second was sub-Saharan interpolity slavery. Alaudach Equiano was an Igbo man from what is now Nigeria. Kidnapped as a child in 1756, later sold into the Atlantic trade. He is describing his community's internal slavery before the Atlantic system reached them. Equiano writes that slave traders passing through his land had to prove how they got their captives. His own people did sometimes sell slaves to passing traders, but only war prisoners or people convicted of crimes like kidnapping or adultery. Both systems had hard lines around who could be sold. The Atlantic system erased them and replaced them with one: race. It didn't just change the rules, it changed the scale. The trans-Saharan trade averaged around 1,000 people a year per route. The Atlantic system peaked at 80,000 a year. And it didn't borrow from the African systems. Before 1450, enslaved people in Africa were absorbed into households and communities. The Atlantic slave trade turned them into the output of an industry, what the Cambridge historian Paul Lovejoy, in the Standard Scholarly History of African Slavery, calls the shift from a marginal institution to a mode of production. That kind of slavery, racially coded, demographically catastrophic, industrial in scale, wasn't a continuation of what came before. It was a disruption. By 1526, the disruption was being protested from inside Africa itself. The King of Kongo, Afonso I, wasn't managing a booming domestic slave market. He was writing desperate letters to the King of Portugal, begging him to stop the trade. The said merchants take our countrymen, the sons of our land and the sons of our noblemen, every day. Our land is being all but depopulated. He didn't stop there. Our will is that in this kingdom there will be no slave trade, nor any outlet for it. If Europeans were just buying from an existing market, why is the King of Congo demanding it to stop? To understand why, we have to go back to the Chronicle we opened with. It's 1444. A Portuguese fleet attacks the Arguin bank off the coast of modern Mauritania. Zurara, Prince Henry's court chronicler, recorded the operation, but they, shouting out, "St. James, St. George, Portugal," at once attacked them, killing and taking all they could, and the aftermath. Then might you see mothers forsaking their children and husbands their wives. Others stowed their children among the seaweed, where our men found them afterwards. Zurara is describing a raid. 165 people. Children pulled from seaweed, mothers separated from their families, taken back to Portugal. This wasn't trade, it was kidnapping. And it wasn't a one-off. The records show constant raids throughout the 1440s. Then, the Europeans stopped raiding. Not because they had a change of heart, they stopped because African forces shut them down. In 1445, Africans wielding poisoned arrows killed 20 of 22 Portuguese on one expedition, including the mission leader, Nuno Tristão. The lasso wasn't working anymore. So in 1448, Prince Henry issued a formal order. No more military raids. From now on, just trade. But here's what trade meant in practice. By the 1450s, the Portuguese factory at Arguin, a fortified post of modern Mauritania, was supplying 800 to 1,000 captives a year. Those captives weren't being offered voluntarily. African intermediaries were raiding their own neighbors to supply European demand, because the price made it profitable. Portugal stopped doing the kidnapping directly. The system still ran on kidnapping. And the numbers climbed. Between 1450 and 1500, 81,000 enslaved Africans crossed into the Atlantic system. In the next century, this went up to 338,000. This is what Afonso was writing about in 1526. In 1529, João III, King of Portugal, replied to him. He told the King of Kongo that depopulation wasn't happening. You say in your letters you do not want there to be any slave trade in your kingdom because it is depopulating your land. I can believe that you only say this as a result of the suffering that the Portuguese cause you, because I am told of the great size of Congo and how it is so populated that it appears that not a single slave has left it. He's not saying no slaves are being taken. He's saying Congo is so large you wouldn't notice. The crown wasn't denying the trade, it was denying the scale. For evidence of that scale, look at what the Europeans on the ground were writing back to their investors. In 1602, a Dutch slave trader on the Gold Coast writes home to explain why he can't fill his ships. They also enslave one another, but not in the same manner as in Angola or Congo, for it would not be possible to load ships here with blacks. They do not have at their disposal a multitude of captives, and on the Gold Coast they cannot be purchased in large numbers. De Marees is admitting two things. Indigenous slavery existed, even on the Gold Coast, but the volume Europeans needed wasn't there. He couldn't fill his ships. Indigenous markets couldn't supply Atlantic demand. So if the Atlantic system was running, and by 1602 it was, massive volume, the captives weren't coming from a pre-existing market. They were being newly captured because the Europeans were buying. Patrick Manning, in his Cambridge History of African Slavery, documented the economics. In the Kingdom of Dahomey, a slave at the coast sold for 15 times what the king paid his own soldiers for each captive they brought in. That gap, between the cost of grabbing someone and the price Europeans paid for them, is what made raiding economically rational. European demand created the gap. The Atlantic system didn't tap into a market. It created the incentive to build one. Which brings us to the fourth document, the one that licensed this before it even scaled. On January 8, 1455, Pope Nicholas V, the highest legal and moral authority in Europe, issued a papal bull called Romanus Pontifex, granting Portugal an exclusive monopoly in Africa. And this wasn't the first time. 3 years earlier, in June 1452, Nicholas V had already signed Dum Diversas. Romanus Pontifex was the upgrade, giving Portugal exclusive rights across Africa. The bull authorizes Portugal to invade, search out and capture, to vanquish and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. This was 1455. The legal authority for perpetual slavery was drawn up before the commerce existed, and the operators relied on it. Prince Henry himself cited various earlier papal bulls as the powerful authority for his slave trade. The Pope didn't license a market, he licensed a conquest. In August 1518, the King of Spain issued a license to Lorenzo de Goravot. The terms: Goravot is authorized to transport 4,000 African slaves, male and female, to the Spanish colonies in the New World. They must be Christians. They should bypass Seville. 4,000 people in a single contract. The provided they be Christians clause was the legal alibi. Captives were baptized on arrival, reframing kidnapping as salvation. This is the Asiento, the moment the papal license became a commercial contract. The bull authorized perpetual slavery in 1455. By 1518, the Spanish crown was contracting for it by the thousand. The Pope didn't just bless a market, he chartered an industry. 5 documents: the Chronicle of the First Raids, the desperate letter of an African king, the frustration of a European buyer, the legal decree of the Pope, and the royal license that put it into practice. I'm not under any illusion this will convince people who use history as a weapon in a culture war. But for everyone else, what these 5 documents show is this. The talking point is too broad to show the full picture. Yes, slavery existed before Europeans arrived, but what didn't exist was the scale, the legal authority, and the racial logic that made it permanent.